In the rich and fertile lands of Omaul, where the sun blessed the earth with warmth and the rivers flowed with life, there lived a man named Chief Namdi. He was a man of great stature and wealth, known across the village and beyond for his wisdom and influence. His compound was the largest in the village, a sprawling estate filled with lush gardens, servants, and treasures from far-off lands. But despite his wealth and power, Chief Namdi lived in a state of perpetual sorrow. Many years ago, he had been married to a woman named Adana, a beauty so radiant that her presence was like the first light of dawn. Their marriage had been one of deep love and mutual respect, a union that was envied by many. Adana had been the joy of his life, the one who could bring a smile to his face even in the darkest of times. Their happiness was short-lived, however. Not long after their marriage, Adana became pregnant. Chief Namdi was overjoyed at the prospect of becoming a father, and he showered Adana with all the care and attention a husband could give. But when the time came for Adana to give birth, tragedy struck. She died during childbirth, and Chief Namdi was told that the child, his only child, was stillborn. The loss of both his wife and child plunged Chief Namdi into a deep depression. The vibrant man who once led his people with strength and vigor became a shadow of his former self. He retreated into his estate, shutting out the world and allowing his once strong heart to wither in sorrow. The laughter that once filled his home was replaced by an eerie silence, broken only by the mournful wind that swept through the empty halls. Years passed, and the pain of losing Adana and their child remained fresh in Chief Namdi's heart. He never remarried, for no woman could take the place of his beloved Adana. His nights were long and lonely, filled with memories of what could have been. The estate, once a place of celebration and joy, became a tomb of memories, with only the servants and the occasional visitor to keep the chief company. The arrival of Chidinma. In the midst of his sorrow, Chief Namdi's estate needed to be maintained, and so he employed many servants to take care of his vast property. One day, a young girl named Chidinma arrived at his doorstep, brought by a merchant who had found her abandoned in a distant town. She was barely more than a child, with soft features that belied her strength and determination. Her eyes, dark as the midnight sky, held a deep sadness that mirrored Chief Namdi's own. The merchant who brought Chidinma to Chief Namdi's home spoke of her hardships, how she had been found wandering the streets with no memory of her parents or where she came from. Out of pity, Chief Namdi agreed to take her in as a housemaid, giving her a place to live and work in exchange for her services. He saw in her a reflection of his own lost innocence, a soul adrift in a world that had been cruel and unforgiving. Chidinma, though young, was hardworking and diligent. She quickly became indispensable in Chief Namdi's household, taking care of the daily chores with a quiet efficiency that impressed everyone. She was respectful and humble, never drawing attention to herself, and the other servants soon grew fond of her. But despite her outward composure, Chidinma carried within her a deep loneliness, a void that could not be filled by the tasks she performed each day. As time passed, Chief Namdi began to notice Chidinma more and more. Her beauty, which had blossomed as she grew older, was undeniable. Her presence brought a subtle warmth to the cold, empty halls of his home, and he found himself drawn to her in ways he had not expected. At first, it was just a passing thought, a flicker of interest in the back of his mind. But as the days turned into weeks and the weeks into months, his thoughts of Chidinma grew stronger. He would watch her as she went about her duties, admiring the grace with which she moved and the kindness in her eyes. He would find excuses to speak with her, lingering in her presence longer than necessary. And in the quiet of the night, when the memories of Adana haunted him the most, it was Chidinma's face that came to mind, offering a brief respite from his sorrow. The forbidden desire. The tension between Chief Namdi and Chidinma grew with each passing day, though neither spoke of it openly. The chief, despite his growing feelings, was a man of honor, and he struggled with the idea of pursuing a relationship with someone so young, someone who worked in his home. But the loneliness that had plagued him for so long had worn down his resolve, and soon he could no longer deny his desire for her. One evening, As the sun dipped below the horizon and the village settled into the calm of night, Chief Namdi called for Chidinma. She came to him, as she always did, her head bowed in respect. But there was an unease in her movements, a nervousness that betrayed her awareness of the growing tension between them. "Chidinma," Chief Namdi began, his voice low and measured. "Come sit with me for a while." She hesitated for a moment before complying, taking a seat on the floor by his feet. Chief Namdi reached out and gently lifted her chin, forcing her to meet his gaze. The sadness in her eyes mirrored his own, and in that moment, he felt a connection with her that he had not felt with anyone since Adana's death. "Do you ever feel lonely, Chidinma?" he asked softly. Chidinma nodded, her voice barely above a whisper. "Yes, Chief. Every day." Chief Namdi sighed deeply, the weight of his emotions pressing down on him. "I have been lonely for many years," he confessed. "But when you are near, that loneliness seems to fade, if only for a little while." The silence that followed was heavy with unspoken words. Chidinma looked up at him, her eyes searching his for some hint of what was to come. Chief Namdi, unable to resist any longer, leaned down and pressed his lips to hers. The kiss was tender, filled with the longing and sorrow that had been building up in both of them for so long. It was a release of emotions that neither had fully understood until that moment. And when they finally pulled away, the boundaries that had once kept them apart were shattered. That night, Chidinma stayed with Chief Namdi in his chambers, and they became lovers. The act was both a comfort and a curse, for while it brought them closer together, it also deepened the sense of unease that lingered in the back of their minds. The unraveling truth. Night after night, Chidinma would come to Chief Namdi's chambers, and they would lose themselves in each other's embrace. But as their relationship grew more intimate, so too did the feeling that something was terribly wrong. Chief Namdi began to notice a strange sense of familiarity with Chidinma, as if he had known her all his life. It was a feeling he could not explain, but one that haunted him every time he looked into her eyes. One day, as Chief Namdi sat in his study, a visitor arrived at his estate. It was an old woman, bent with age, but with eyes that sparkled with the wisdom of many years. She introduced herself as Mama Ada, a healer and storyteller who had traveled across many lands. She had heard of Chief Namdi's sorrow and had come to offer her help, sensing that there was a story yet untold that needed to be revealed. Chief Namdi, though skeptical at first, invited Mama Ada into his home. There was something about her presence that commanded respect, and he found himself drawn to her words as she began to speak. "Chief," Mama Ada began, her voice soft but filled with authority, "I have traveled far and wide, and I have seen many things. But the spirits have guided me here, to you, for a reason. There is a tale that I must share with you, a tale that holds the key to your sorrow." Chief Namdi leaned forward, his curiosity piqued. "Tell me, Mama Ada," he said. "What is this tale you speak of?" Mama Ada took a deep breath and began to weave her story. She spoke of a young woman, beautiful and kind, who had fallen in love with a powerful chief. Their love was pure and strong, and soon, they were blessed with the news that the woman was with child. But as the time for the child's birth drew near, the woman fell ill, and despite the best efforts of the village healers, she died in childbirth. The chief, heartbroken, was told that his child had also perished. But the truth was far more tragic. The child, a girl, had been taken by a deceitful nurse who had sold her to a merchant far away, hoping to make a profit from the chief's loss. The child grew up in a distant land, never knowing her true heritage or the great love her parents had shared. As Mama Ada spoke, Chief Namdi felt a cold dread settle in his chest. The story she was telling mirrored his own life, the loss of his beloved Adana and their child. But he had been told that the child had died. Could it be possible that she had lived, that she had been taken from him all those years ago? "Chief," Mama Ada said, her voice cutting through his thoughts, "the child I speak of is closer than you think. She has been living under your roof, serving you faithfully, unaware of the blood that runs through her veins." The realization hit Chief Namdi like a bolt of lightning. He stood up abruptly, his heart pounding in his chest as the truth began to unravel before him. Chidinma, could she be his daughter? The very girl he had been sleeping with, the girl he had developed feelings for, could she be the child he had lost so long ago? Mama Ada, Chief Namdi whispered, his voice trembling. How can this be? How can Chidinma be my daughter? Mama Ada nodded solemnly. The spirits do not lie, Chief. She is your blood, the child of your beloved Adana. The nurse who took her from you has long since passed, but the merchant who bought her brought her back to you, unknowingly returning her to the place she was meant to be. Chief Namdi's knees gave way, and he sank to the floor, overcome with grief and horror. The woman he had taken as his lover was his own flesh and blood, his daughter. The weight of this revelation was too much to bear, and he wept, tears of sorrow and regret flowing freely. The aftermath. The days that followed were filled with a deep sense of shame and guilt for Chief Namdi. He could not look at Chidinma without feeling the crushing weight of what had transpired between them. The knowledge that he had unknowingly committed such a grievous sin tore at his soul, leaving him hollow and broken. Chidinma, too, was devastated when she learned the truth. The life she had known, the love she had felt, all of it had been built on a foundation of lies and deception. She could not stay in the compound any longer, for the shame was too great. With a heavy heart, she left Chief Namdi's estate, wandering aimlessly in search of a place where she could start anew. Chief Namdi, consumed by grief, withdrew even further into himself. The estate, once filled with life and activity, became a place of mourning. The servants whispered among themselves, unsure of what had happened, but sensing the deep sorrow that had settled over their master. Days turned into weeks and weeks into months, but the pain never lessened for Chief Namdi. He could not forgive himself for what had happened, and the guilt gnawed at him, day and night. The memories of his beloved Adana, once a source of comfort, now served only to remind him of the terrible mistake he had made. He sought out Mama Ada once more, hoping that she might offer some guidance, some way to atone for what he had done. But when he found her, she shook her head sadly. The path you walk now is one of redemption, Chief, she said. You cannot change what has happened, but you can seek forgiveness from the spirits, from your daughter, and most importantly, from yourself. But forgiveness was not something that came easily to Chief Namdi. He spent the rest of his days in a state of quiet repentance, devoting himself to helping others in the village, trying to do some good in the world to make up for the wrong he had done. But no matter how much he gave, no matter how many he helped, the shadow of his past loomed over him, a constant reminder of the sin he could never undo. As for Chidinma, she eventually found her way to a distant village where she started a new life. She never spoke of her past, burying the memories deep within her heart. She lived simply, taking on a new name and identity, trying to forget the pain and the shame that had marked her early years. But even in her new life, she could not entirely escape the past. The scars remained, a silent reminder of the truth she could never fully erase. The echoes of the past. Years passed, and Chief Namdi grew older, his once powerful frame now bent with age and sorrow. He never remarried, never sought the companionship of another woman, for he could not bring himself to move on from the tragedy that had defined his life. The people of O'Mowell still respected him, but they could see the sadness in his eyes, the weight of a burden he could never share. One day, as Chief Namdi sat alone in his chambers, reflecting on the choices he had made and the life he had led, he felt a presence beside him. He looked up to see Mama Ada standing there, her eyes filled with compassion. "Chief," she said softly, "your time on this earth is drawing to a close. You have lived with your sorrow for many years, but now it is time to let go." Chief Namdi nodded, tears welling in his eyes. "I have tried to atone, Mama Ada, but the guilt still haunts me. I cannot forgive myself." Mama Ada placed a hand on his shoulder. "Forgiveness is not something you earn, Chief. It is something you must allow yourself to receive. The spirits are merciful, and they see the good you have done. But you must forgive yourself if you are ever to find peace." With those words, Mama Ada left, and Chief Namdi was left alone with his thoughts. He closed his eyes, taking a deep breath as he tried to release the pain that had held him captive for so long. And in that moment, he felt a sense of calm wash over him, a peace he had not known in many years. That night, Chief Namdi passed away in his sleep, his heart finally at rest. The village mourned his passing, but they also celebrated the life he had lived, remembering the wisdom and kindness he had shown in his later years. They did not know the full extent of his sorrow, but they knew that he had been a man who had tried to do good, despite the pain he had carried. As for Chidinma, she lived out the rest of her days in quiet solitude, far from the village of Omaul. She never returned to the place of her birth, never sought out the father she had once known. But in her heart, she forgave him, understanding that they had both been victims of a cruel twist of fate. And so, the story of Chief Namdi and Chidinma became a cautionary tale, passed down through the generations in Omaul. It was a tale of love and loss, of mistakes made and the price that must be paid. But it was also a tale of redemption, of the power of forgiveness, and the importance of finding peace within oneself. In the end, Chief Namdi and Chidinma were not defined by their tragic past, but by the choices they made in the face of that tragedy. And in that, they found a measure of redemption, even in a world that had been so cruel to them both.